In this lesson, we are going to talk about a couple of Supreme Court cases that address the balance of power between national and state government. So the first of those is McCulloch v. Maryland, and this is a case from 1819, and this is one of your required cases for the AP exam. So you definitely want to know this one. So this case is going to center on the Second Bank of the United States, a national bank chartered by Congress whose charter had been left to expire amid a debate on constitutionality. So several states, including Maryland, are going to be questioning the legality of this national bank, and they are going to pass laws taxing the second bank. So there was a law that was passed requiring all banks in Maryland that were not incorporated by the state of Maryland to pay a $15,000 tax. And the purpose of this law was to try to force the U.S. bank out of the state. Bank officials in Maryland, and this is where James McCulloch, who is the chief cashier of the Bank of the United States, comes in, is going to refuse to pay that tax, so the case is going to go to the Supreme Court. So there are two questions that the Supreme Court has to consider. The first is, does Congress have the authority to establish a Bank of the United States? And number two, did states have the authority to tax a bank branch operating in its borders? So to answer the first question, Justice John Marshall is going to cite the necessary and proper clause. Remember that clause says that Congress can pass any law to carry out its enumerated powers. And he says that clause affirms the right of the national government to establish the national bank as an implied power. So enumerated powers of the federal government include borrowing money, coining money, and taxing. So it is implied that they also have the power to establish a national bank. The court then rules that states cannot tax bank branches, so those federal bank branches, saying that states have no right to tax constitutional means employed by the government to execute its constitutional powers. So the people of a single state cannot confer a sovereignty which will extend over the federal government carrying out its powers. The second case is Gibbons v. Ogden, and this is from 1824. And this case is going to arise from a battle between two powerful businessmen in the steamboat business in New York and New Jersey. Aaron Ogden, so one of those steamboat operators, had been granted a monopoly by the New York state law that protected his routes within New York and between New York and New Jersey. Thomas Gibbons had been granted a license by the federal government to operate on the same route. So he filed a suit to block the monopoly granted by Ogden. So Ogden is granted that monopoly from the states. Gibbons is going to be granted a federal license. So it's going to be state versus federal here. So it goes to the Supreme Court, and the question that the court has to answer is, does the Commerce Clause give Congress the authority over interstate navigation? So remember, the Commerce Clause gives Congress the authority over commerce between foreign nations and between multiple states. And the court is going to rule that the regulation of navigation for the purpose of interstate commerce was a power reserved to Congress by that Commerce Clause. So it's between multiple states, so therefore Congress has that power given by the Commerce Clause. So that means that New York law favoring Ogden, so the New York law giving him the monopoly, was invalid. So the court is going to rule in favor of Gibbons in this case. And that is where we are going to stop with this lesson.